All right, so there's a couple more questions in your notes for section 4. I just want to go over those quickly. Right? Mostly I want to talk about this type of question that you're going to run into, where you're taking 3 species and you're trying to figure out which 2 are most closely related. And I want to talk to you about how you're supposed to do this and what you're supposed to avoid. Right? So if I have humans, bats, and moths, right? And I'm trying to figure out which 2 things are most closely related. Right? You might be tempted, considering you're going to use a quick Google search for something like this, to connect humans and bats, just like we did before in this example, right? But what you're going to be tempted to do that you can't do is you're going to use labels. You're going to say that, oh, they're both, they're both mammals, right? But mammals is just a label. It doesn't actually give any reasoning. Right? You're supposed to use underlying structures that these organisms have in common to explain your reasoning. So when I say mammals, what do I mean? Right? So mammals have hair, right? All mammals have hair. So that's a structure. That's something that maybe I could use. But I also have to be careful, right? Because I might use hair, but I might not, because moths have hair-like filaments all over them, right? It might not be exactly the same as the hair on a human or a bat, but it's very, very similar. So how do I distinguish moths from humans and bats still? And I'm supposed to come up with something that links 2 things together and excludes the other one. Hair is not going to work in this case, right? I'm not going to be able to use that. So we fall to other things. Right? Again, I want you to avoid analogous things. We talked about in the other example in the notes how just because these 2 things have wings doesn't mean that the underlying structures of those wings are similar. That could be a coincidence. This could be analogous. Right? So in all reality, I'm not going to use wings just like I didn't use in the last one, but why am I not going to use wings? The answer is because the underlying structures, the moth's wings, the insect's wings, are way, way different than the bat's wings. And again, underlying structure in a bat's wings actually look a lot like a human hand. Right? So when I have these fingers that are a little elongated with webbing to connect them so you can fly, so you can catch that air and fly, right? Bats are much more closely related to humans from that standpoint alone, right? Or you could have gone with an even more obvious answer, right? That's just the fact that bats and humans have bones would make them more closely related to each other than that insect that just has an exoskeleton. Right? So, again, you have to be specific when you're answering these questions. I want you to avoid analogous things like wings, right, in this case. And I want you to come up with a homologous structure, some underlying structure that 2 organisms have in common. You cannot just use the label mammals. That actually doesn't mean anything. But when you realize that mammals are vertebrates, they have bones, right? When you look at these 2 specific mammals and how they have similar bone structures, right, the fingers, that is what makes them more closely related in this context. So just be careful when you're answering questions like this. Otherwise, this one is just out of homologous, vestigial, and analogous. Hopefully you figured out already that the 2 structures that hint at common ancestry, the 2 things that indicate that something is related would be your vestigial and your homologous, since both of those things are homologous technically. And homologous, by definition, means that they are similar in origin, that they have structures that came from common ancestors. So that way you can finish up your questions before you do your study guide.